Yeah, what's the best AVS that you spoke to? Like at least like top 3 something. Like that excites you, that makes you like feel that our industry is doing some good.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff that's going on around building out like compute chains and finding other ways to sort of like allow for restaked and building out like L2s that use this proof of stake security. I think those are quite cool. The ones that I've been most interested in are the more like financial applications around building things like insurance protocols, where people basically allow you to like insure, like basically like reinsure your like restaking risk by using like slashing conditions to pay out insurance. You can even think about things of like building out AVS protocols as like options, where the options are paid out through slashing and things of that sort. So I think very excited about sort of all the infra we can build on restaking, but I think the financial applications have also been quite fascinating as well.
Yeah, I think okay, so in terms of AVSs, Ethereum in a way the roadmap itself has dictated by design a lot of middleware services. So the fact that we have like an L2-centric roadmap means that we need bridges, interoperability protocols, message passing, shared sequencers, DAs, etc. that like makes life easier as we keep expanding horizontally. So I think AVSs make that like or networks, whatever you want to call it, but like restaking makes it easier to bootstrap these networks, because at the end of the day, if all of them launch their own tokens and all of them are backed by or being secured by highly volatile, low liquid tokens, and we know that the more we launch, unless something drastic happens, like on an average, the liquidity for each individual token is going to go down, right? So given a long enough timeline, it just makes way more sense for all of these ETH-aligned services to also be deriving security from ETH itself. So from that perspective, like use cases like that actually help support the Ethereum roadmap, and the fact that, in other words, more incentivized to be within the restaking ecosystem. It's just something that excites me from an AVS perspective.
I'll start by introducing myself first.
Oh yeah, of course.
I'm Rose from StakeStone, and we're building the most stable liquid asset stone, Ethereum, and with a dynamic mechanism, with an on-chain proposal mechanism where we can deploy our underlying asset through different staking and restaking protocols. So obviously we have most of our Ethereum deployed through Lido, and then 70% to Eigenlayer and 30% to Symbiotic through our P2P vault on Mellow. So we're very Lido aligned and very, but we always focus on building the liquidity layer on for the Stone Ethereum token, like LP token itself, and we always focus on the real DeFi usage, like use cases for this LP token, and how we differ from like a lot of the staking protocols out there is that we don't really do the actual staking service itself, but we focus on the DeFi aspect, and also work with like a PMM lending model where we have like an omni-chain redemption mechanism where that makes sure our LP token is the most liquid asset for DeFi usage. And I'm really excited to see, like in 2025, as you mentioned, like a lot of the insurance for risks, slashing risk or any other. And also really excited to see you guys launch your networks and having like these real restaking, securing the network, and
Thank you. We're excited as well. We have a really strong push from ETH. And like other Ethereum derivatives, LSTs, to be used as a base for economic security for networks and like AVSs and DSSs and everything like that. Then the second push came from Bitcoin community, because they want to do that as well, and due to nature of Bitcoin protocol, they actually need that in a big way. What do you think is next? How you see the composition of economic security moving forward?
Yeah, so as someone who started building in Eigenlayer since the early days, we've seen a lot of different experimentation on collateral, economic security, especially in the early days where the there were like 10 or 15 LSTs, everyone was listed, everyone had the same caps or similar caps, and what that ended up having is we start getting a lot of economic security from, I'm not getting the right word, I want to say shitty, but I don't want to use the word shitty, but you know what I mean, like essentially LSTs that don't actually make a lot of, like don't have the same security standards as Teeth and Lido does, right, for example. So what ends up happening is when, as an AVS, when I want economic security, I would want economic security from quality collateral. Like I do not want a multi-sig LST to essentially like get all of my security from there, right? So as far as Ethereum is concerned, like I don't think it makes a lot of sense to compromise on security just for the sake of diversity in the LSTs in which you're getting economic security from. So since day one, we've been accepting ST, then that's the only LST that we accept, simply because there is probably no other LST that meets the same security standards.
Can you name a few shitty LSTs?
NFA.
On the contrary, I think I quite entertain the aspect of having like permissionless, collaterals as shitty LSDs. I think it's up to the network to choose, or AVS to choose whatever they want to use to secure the network, and I think that's the beauty of like having like a permissionless architecture for that.
But doesn't that make you as an LRT, your biggest bottleneck will be the shittiest LST that you accept?
Yeah, but we're not focused on building LRT, so.
Yeah, but you're accepting users' assets, right?
Yeah, but you kind of decide which asset, and I think as a protocol, you take the risk of curating that.
Okay.
I mean, I think what's exciting about the space, also just to introduce myself, my name's Gabe, I work at Gauntlet. Well, among other things, I help run the restaking team, where we're doing sort of risk assessments for various restaking protocols and LRT protocols, work with Eigenlayer, Symbiotic as well, a bunch of others. What's cool about the space to me is basically around like capital efficiency, right? So you have a bunch of ETH that's like currently being staked and like securing proof of stake for Ethereum, which is awesome, but like there's a lot of uncorrelated ways which you could reuse that ETH that don't necessarily add on to the risk, right? The chance of ETH chain being slashed is probably uncorrelated to the chance of some random AVS being slashed. And so because of the fact that these are like uncorrelated risks, you can like you should be able to like reuse that capital in order to gain economic efficiency by earning multiple sources of income on it. So you're not just earning income from ETH, but you're also earning income from various AVSs. Now the difficulty with that, which is like kind of what we're talking about, is how do you decide which AVSs are safe? How do you decide like which AVSs you're willing to subscribe to? There's gonna be other sort of application chains where slashing events are incredibly rare. They occur very few, like not very often. And in those cases, yeah, you're probably pretty risk-free to add that and just add another income source. But because it's so low risk, the amount of income you're gonna get from those types of AVSs is going to be quite low, right? And so you're going to have this kind of curve of like low risk AVSs where the income flow is fairly small, but like the risk is also fairly small and uncorrelated. On the other side, you're going to have AVSs that are sort of more on the financial side around things like protecting against insurance for slashing across all AVSs, and those are going to start to get more and more correlated. So what we're working on at Gauntlet is trying to figure out frameworks around how are these things correlated? How do we maximize the efficiency of staked capital without necessarily sacrificing too much on risk, and like providing sort of risk-benefit ratio to customers that they're most excited about.
Yeah, so speaking about slashing, by the way, hi, I'm Kratik, I'm at Renzo protocol. I lose my voice every time Bitcoin goes all-time high. So please bear with me. So speaking about slashing, I'm curious to know how's the slashing framework like at Symbiotic? I know you guys have been cranking really hard on that. Would you like to share about it?
Yeah, so it's a combination of a couple things.
At Symbiotic, sorry.
No, you can take it. You can take it.
No, you take it.
Yeah, like generally we were trying to be like extra careful with that because that's a systemic risk for restaking protocol. If you're not careful enough, or like some huge network slashes like a sizable portion of your tokens, this is going to be like damaging for both users and like the whole general part of our industry. Yeah, like we try to never to design something that's like one size fits all. So like be it interrupt subjective tokens, some like double sign mechanism that like Babylon is using for the POS. Yeah, the general idea was that the more different isolated like ecosystems, like not ecosystems, but classes of networks you have, that have like different slashing mechanisms. So some of them are like subjective, right? Like you can't prove anything. It's like either consensus based or prediction market based or something like that. And the other ones can be verified. So this is what the first part. We don't mandate how people slash. As long as like stake operator and network agree on the slashing conditions, they're fine. And then there is another layer of like security. It basically is a resolver. A resolver is a vetoing an arbitration entity and primitive that we use. We expect it to be committees mostly, not centralized committees, but committees selected by the stake providers and like that are like respected for a while. Then, like once we go into like more mature situation in the market, like in an industry, and we figure out how to do it safely, it's going to be the last resort entity and primitive to stop unlawful slashing. And with these two measures, we are kind of like safer, like than any centralized solution. If your slashing mechanism fails, you have a fallback in resolver, and if resolver fails, yeah, like only a portion of the stake that is like under this particular algorithm is going to be slashed. So yeah, we were trying to like figure out a way how to do like some centralized, not centralized, but like central and like all-encompassing methodology. But like it's really stupid. You don't design systems to be like one point of failure. So yeah, like there are a lot of rumors and like unsubstantiated like fears relating to like, oh, we're gonna destroy every Ethereum there is. Like, well, how are we gonna use like proof of stake if there's only 10 Ethereum left? No, like it's not gonna happen because like we are. First of all, we are like way early for that. Like we don't pose any like systemic risk to Ethereum. And secondly, like again, they're going to be isolated. There's going to be mediation. There's going to be a lot of like fallbacks for us to use. And again, like the resolver mechanism, it enables networks. This is like a lot of things that are going to come from using shared security. It's not only about capital optimization and you're getting like a middleware contract and SDKs and frameworks and like amazing amount of like value add. It's as well about like mechanisms you couldn't use before. Like now you have resolver. If your network is being upgraded or a slashing mechanism are being like fine-tuned, you can like even if you had like disabled the resolver before, you can re-enable it again just for the transition period, which is like not something that happens like in a natural development. And I feel like the more we go, the more optimizations we can get for networks that are launching with shared security, at least with Symbiotic.
I'm actually quite curious about like the framework Gauntlet is using for risk management and ABS.
Yeah, so it's sort of a combination of there's sort of two sides. Like one is thinking about like LRTs and like how do you think about the security of like an LRT token? If you hold easy ETH, like how safe is it to hold that? And the other side is like if you are an LRT, like what AVSs do you actually want to subscribe to? So from like AVS risk framework perspective, we're mainly focusing on sort of like with qualitative and like quantitative metrics. So quantitative would be, when slashing goes live, like what are the actual slashing conditions that we've seen? How often do they get slashed? What is sort of the distribution of slashing events? So it's really good for protocols that are going to get like relatively consistent. So things that are like application chains where slashing events are fairly rare, but like reasonably consistent, right? There's some probability of a slashing event occurring because AWS goes down or something along those lines. The other side would be more like qualitative. So what are the slashing conditions? Like how sort of extensive are these things, and kind of individually assessing those. So it's kind of how I think about like AVS risk selection. Now, as like the number of AZSs gets more complicated, like obviously we're gonna have to sort of build out more and more complex models to understand that. On the other side, we also offer frameworks around sort of understanding the risk of like LRT tokens as well. And so most of the focus there has been on a couple of things. One is sort of like whale constant. It's really mostly around like liquidity, around how quickly can you exit out of your LRT token given like current market conditions. And so there we're monitoring things like secondary market liquidity. So how quickly could you trade out of an LRT token on something like Uniswap? Within that, of like what's the concentration of LPs within that? How much liquidity is within that? What is the deviation of price for that LRT token against sort of the NAV value? Like, are we seeing major deviations? Yes or no? And then lastly is also sort of the more qualitative of what is like the withdrawal queue? Like, can I immediately withdraw directly from the LRT, or is this something that I'm gonna have to wait for days or weeks, or maybe there isn't even a withdrawal queue at all? And so combined with all of that, we've sort of built out a risk framework that we now publicize through a public dashboard, basically quantifying the risk for all of the LRT tokens that are
Is
out
that
today.
already live? Or?
Yeah, that's currently live today. Yeah, go to gauntlet.xyz, you can find it in our dashboard section.
And how's Renzo kind of tackling these problems?
Yeah, I mean, we've been speaking with Gauntlet and the team from early days, and essentially the way we see risk is until slashing goes live, the majority of the risk that a user or an LRT takes is on the on-chain liquidity side. But the moment slashing goes live, it becomes a more multifaceted risk approach where you have to consider, as Gabe mentioned, like all the qualitative and quantitative factors when you're securing AVSs and even like the probability of slashing events, the kind of networks you're securing, the slashing penalties, and it's a job it's better done by risk managers who have a full-time, risk portfolio. So, yeah, super. I think the industry's done super well in the sense that like we don't have to build everything from scratch. We have really cool partners who do that for us. And one of the reasons I asked the Symbiotic question, because I was curious, Gabe, is on the Gauntlet side, like, where we're considering like the extreme slashing scenarios where users lose money, but how do you think about the fact that before we get to fully permissionless slashing scenarios where users actually lose their money, will the risk models update over time until we get there? Because as Misha mentioned, right, like it's not like we're not going to introduce a single point of failure from day one, like it's a gradual approach, right? And B, like, do you think the funds that are slashed how should the restaking protocol take care of those funds? Like, should it be burned? Should it be returned to the AVS? Should it be kept in a safe somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think the general, I think funnily enough, I feel like that DeFi is often actually like a little bit too risk adverse in a lot of ways, which is like funny talking like a crypto sense, but like really like there's not that many insolvencies or like slashing events that really occur, right? If you put your money in STETH, like you feel pretty confident that you're not going to like get slashed for any large amount. I think the same is like largely true for most of the AVSs that people are like currently building, where like you have some slashing events that are relatively rare. We can kind of quantify that risk and like build out like risk adjusted yield. But I think like you do want there to be some risk of slashing, right? Like I don't know about you guys, but like I don't have all my money in T-bills. Like you want to have some risk to increase the reward that you have. And so I expect like AVSs overall to move down the same spectrum where maybe you launch with a bunch of very safe things, you kind of have the restaking equivalent of like T-bills, but then over time, like you start to have more and more AVSs, you have insurance protocols launching, you have financial products that are launching using like restaking and AVS. That increases the risk, but it also then increases the yield. And so what I'm really excited to do at Gauntlet is sort of how do we quantify that risk? Like how do we feel more comfortable putting more capital into these types of products, understanding the type of risk? Some customers want to be very safe, that's totally fine. We can find a set of AVSs that suits those needs. Some customers are much more willing to take on more risk for higher yield, and that's also totally fine. Ideally, Gauntlet and other sort of risk providers can construct those portfolios of AVSs and then provide that to the retail public, or to the public generally.
I wanted to like elaborate a little bit more on what you were mentioning before about like the stability of the LRT. I think that's like something we focus a lot on, and making sure like even without having to set up like multiple pools on different like layer 2s or layer 1s, we work with native like a PMM lending solution where we have readily available Ethereum for omni-chain redemption, where market makers can come in and they borrow this ETH, native ETH, for omni-chain redemption. We're actually putting together a paper with Native and Morpho to showcase this case study where like Stone Ethereum as long tail asset, how it's how Native is empowering our liquidity omni-chain and also on ETH mainnet to have the stability of the ticker, and also we're basically how lending can happen on Morpho. I mean, it's a little more DeFi, but moving away from the staking aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think like liquidity on secondary markets for stake tokens and restaking tokens are like really a fascinating subject, right? Like Lido sort of solved that by just spending like literally tens of millions of dollars for that curve pool, where they had sort of up until recently like billions of dollars of liquidity for STETH. Now, in retrospect, it works. Like they have the market share, so clearly you can't be too upset. But like, they probably could have had that be a much smaller pool and getting the same results. So a lot of the work that we've also done at Gauntlet on sort of more incentives and the secondary liquidity side has been, we run a lot of incentive programs for protocols. So we offer both incentives as well as like POL as a service. So if you're launching an LRT token, so you're launching something like Easy ETH, really important factor is like partly the withdrawal queue, but also like how quickly and how cheaply can I sell out of this on something like Uniswap. And so doing things like incentives programs to draw in enough liquidity to make sure that users feel really comfortable holding your token because they can get out of it really quickly is really, really essential at sort of adopting, at getting mass adoption. And so the two options there would be like incentives or protocol and liquidity. So you can either like distribute incentives and create liquidity through that. The other option would be you take some amount of your treasury and then you can sort of LP those pools directly. Those are both things that Gauntlet also provides. So we have a protocol called Era where you give us tokens, we can distribute those as incentives, or alternatively we can provide that as protocol and liquidity. So that's been sort of another offering that we've been trying to help move along the space and make sure that people feel safe entering these positions because the liquidity is there.
Nice. I have a question for all of you, but before, like, just to wake up your imagination a bit, we have one network in the pipeline. It's fairly early, but like their network mechanisms requires not requires, but it's gonna be slashed like daily, and that's the business model. So slash daily, yeah. I'm not going to share any details, but we have those as well. So we'll see novel mechanisms. Like slashing is super rare in proof of stake, especially in delegated proof of stake. But yeah, like we'll see a lot of those. And like because we are going live and restaking stops being a meme. Like LRTs are actually gonna have a lockup period because you actually deploy your funds somewhere. They're not just like involved like earning your like tokens. No, like what do you think about that? Like as far as I can see, there's gonna be a negotiation or like push and pull between networks and stake providers to get like stake providers obviously will want the lowest lockup period possible. The networks are gonna require some form of like at least like for them to verify if they're like fraud proofs or like contentions or something about that. That there's going to be a limit to where you can go. Like what's your thinking about that? Like how do you expect this to play out?
Yeah, I think so far we've talked about various risk measures that are in place or various risks that we're undertaking when we're restaking. But I think the most under-talked or overlooked topic here is probably the duration risk that we take when we're restaking, right? Right now there is a enforced period of 7 days to unrestake or take your funds out from restaking protocols. But why do we have those 7 days? Like there is no obvious answer to that. It's just no networks are live. Like there's no like real. Before there was real slashing at all, like even like from day one, we had a 7-day withdrawal period just to like get people to get used to restaking. But like if you think about from a long enough perspective, the more networks you start securing, given how flexible the design space is for you to build your network, every network should have a different lockup requirement, like, right? Like I remember personally, it took me 21 days to unstake my Luna. By the time I got it back. So, and it's there for a reason, right? Like, it's not like we have an arbitrary 21-day holdup. So I think the duration risk will become more and more real as more networks go live and they start having these requirements. And if you want to secure this network, then you need to sign up for the longer duration risk, which means that two important things come into the picture. And as Gabe mentioned, one is on-chain liquidity of your token as an LRT, and two, the withdrawal buffer that you have. So the way the LRTs work is we don't 100% restake all of the user funds. It's usually like kind of like a Pareto principle, like 90-95% of your stake of the user deposits are actually restaked, but like there's still a 5 to 10% buffer, and Lido also works in a similar fashion. Where you have some ETH in the buffer contract, so when a user withdraws, like as long as the withdrawal request is lesser than the buffer, user almost gets their funds instantly. And instantly means less than 3 days. It's not like literally instantly, but it's fairly instant compared to the withdrawal queue that you have. So what this means is like the withdrawal queue usually, the withdrawal buffer usually acts as, well, buffer that reduces the duration risk for a user. But in cases of extreme scenarios, a user will have to wait for whatever the maximum hold-up requirement is for a network. Luckily, in our case, since it's like, we restake 95% of the user deposits, like Renzo does. And that's one of the most efficient LRTs out there, and that's why it's one of the highest yield-bearing LRTs out there. And since it's like we have $1.6 billion, we are comfortable with a around 75 mil buffer that we have on the withdrawal side. So it makes things more convenient and more liquid for a user and less risky as far as duration risk is concerned.
I think it all comes down to like incentives, right? How the networks, AVSs are going to, have this push and pull. But with the ones we're working with quite a few, like Oracle, and also the ones that are launching on Symbiotic. I think Hive DA. There's like quite interesting models there. I think if you're depends on the revenue model of the AVS as well, and how the network is secure. I think it really LPs are happy to have certain amount of funds locked up, and if they see like a bigger reward. So, and I think it comes down to protocols like us, StakeStone, and like Renzo to be almost like the platform for negotiation between these parties.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also interesting to consider it from the perspective of the AVS as well, right? Because like there's a lot of benefits with having like larger lockup periods, right? Of like you can keep less sort of money in supply, and that means you can earn higher fees overall. And so think about it a lot from like the perspective of that, of like how can you design an AVS to be most attractive to people sort of restaking within it, right? Like lower withdrawal periods and lower unlock periods make it easier for protocols like Renzo or StakeStone to allocate to you, having like less onerous slashing conditions, right? Are your slashing conditions super easy to understand, like really rare to occur? Are your slashing conditions really complicated and difficult? Even things like what type of audits are you getting are all like factors that people are going to take into account when how much revenue are they going to demand in order to be willing to stake within your AVS. Like the less risky that you can make staking within your AVS, the lower yield that you're going to have to pay out to restakers, thus saving you money as the AVS. And so, the challenge for protocols like Renzo and StakeStone is basically like what AVSs do you need to subscribe to in order to maximize risk-adjusted yield for your users? And like that's also been a challenge that we at Gauntlet have been really excited about helping to tackle.
Nice. Do we have time still?
I was about to jump in and tell you that actually the time has run out.
Okay. Yeah. My internal clock works.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the panelists. It was really illuminating. Yeah. Give a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.